Just want to report a car fire. He's up on the side of I-10, but I saw like flames literally inside the vehicle.
To understand the tragedy of Mercedes Vega, you have to understand who she was beyond the headlines and the horror. Mercedes wasn't just another name on a case file. She was a vibrant, hardworking young woman building a life for herself in Tempe, Arizona. At 22, she worked as an exotic dancer at a local club. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was honest work and, for Mercedes, it was a stepping stone. She had dreams of going back to school, saving money, and eventually starting a business of her own. Those close to her describe her as warm, sharp-witted, and deeply loyal. She had a small circle of friends and a tight bond with her family. While her work brought her into contact with strangers every night, Mercedes was cautious, always keeping her guard up and maintaining strict boundaries. But above all, Mercedes was brave. In 2020, she found herself face-to-face with an armed robber young man who had targeted dancers from her club, following them home and robbing them at gunpoint. Instead of shrinking into fear, Mercedes did something many wouldn't. She identified him in a photo lineup, wrote a victim impact statement, and agreed to testify in court. She knew the risk. She knew standing up might put her in danger, but she believed in doing the right thing. And that bravery, what made her a symbol of strength, may have also made her a target. As her court date approached, Mercedes became more careful. Friends recall her mentioning that she felt like she was being watched. She brushed it off with nervous laughter, but there was something in her voice, a subtle tension, an unspoken fear. She had survived a violent attack once, but what she didn't know was that the danger wasn't over. It was just beginning. To understand the tragedy of Mercedes Vega, you have to understand who she was beyond the headlines and the horror. Mercedes wasn't just another name on a case file. She was a vibrant, hard-working young woman building a life for herself in Tempe, Arizona. At 22, she worked as an exotic dancer at a local club. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was honest work, and for Mercedes, it was a stepping stone. She had dreams of going back to school, saving money, and eventually starting a business of her own. Those close to her describe her as warm, sharp-witted, and deeply loyal. She had a small circle of friends and a tight bond with her family. While her work brought her into contact with strangers every night, Mercedes was cautious, always keeping her guard up and maintaining strict boundaries. But above all, Mercedes was brave. In 2020, she found herself face-to-face with an armed robber young man who had targeted dancers from her club, following them home and robbing them at gunpoint. Instead of shrinking into fear, Mercedes did something many wouldn't. She identified him in a photo lineup, wrote a victim impact statement, and agreed to testify in court. She knew the risk. She knew standing up might put her in danger, but she believed in doing the right thing. And that bravery, what made her a symbol of strength, may have also made her a target. As her court date approached, Mercedes became more careful. Friends recall her mentioning that she felt like she was being watched. She brushed it off with nervous laughter, but there was something in her voice, a subtle tension, an unspoken fear. She had survived a violent attack once, but what she didn't know was that the danger wasn't over. It was just beginning. Mercedes Vega's courage in standing up to her attacker would become a turning point in her life, but not in the way she hoped. In 2020, after surviving a terrifying armed robbery, Mercedes did what most victims are too afraid to do. She reported it. The man who had threatened her with a gun outside her home was identified as Young, a known criminal with a growing rap sheet. Prosecutors later revealed that Mercedes wasn't his only victim. He had allegedly targeted multiple dancers from the same club, following them home late at night and robbing them at gunpoint. But Mercedes was the only one who agreed to testify. Her statement became a key piece of the prosecution's case. Her willingness to take the stand could have put Young behind bars for years. But instead of being kept in custody while awaiting trial, Young was released with an ankle monitor, free to walk the streets, free to hold grudges. As her court date neared, Mercedes began noticing strange things. She mentioned to friends that she felt like she was being watched. Her phone would ring and then go silent. She'd spot unfamiliar cars idling near her apartment complex, and though she tried to brush it off, those closest to her knew something was off. One friend later recalled her saying, "If anything ever happens to me, check the guy I testified against." It was half joke, half warning, but behind the humor was a real sense of dread. Then, the harassment escalated in subtle ways. Mercedes once came home to find her door slightly ajar. Though nothing was stolen, she changed her locks and moved parking spots regularly. She even considered getting a camera for her apartment, but time and money made it difficult. Despite the unease, Mercedes never backed down. She was determined to testify. To her, it wasn't just about what had happened to Harriet, it was about protecting others. She wanted to stop Young from hurting anyone else. But what Mercedes didn't know was that Young wasn't planning to face her in court. According to prosecutors, he had something far more sinister in mind, and he wasn't planning it alone. In the months leading up to her murder, authorities believe Young orchestrated a deadly plan, recruiting two men from Tennessee Sincere, Hayes and Jared Grado, travel across the country and make sure Mercedes never made it to that witness stand. What began as justice for a robbery was about to spiral into something far more brutal. On a warm evening in April 2023, Mercedes Vega was seen for the last time alive. Surveillance footage captured her walking through the parking structure of her apartment complex, keys in hand, completely unaware that she was being watched and followed. According to investigators, sometime between her arrival and the early hours of the next morning, Mercedes was abducted. Inside the parking garage, blood was found on the pavement near where she had parked. More blood was later discovered on the passenger seat of her car, indicating a struggle had taken place. Detectives believe that Mercedes was ambushed, possibly lured or forced into another vehicle. From that moment, she vanished. A day later, 60 miles away near Tonopah, Arizona, a passerby reported a vehicle engulfed in flames off the side of Interstate 10. When emergency responders arrived, they discovered the burnt shell of a Chevrolet Malibu. In the back seat, they found human remains later identified as Mercedes Vega. The details that followed were almost too horrific to comprehend. The medical examiner concluded that Mercedes had suffered multiple injuries before she died. She had been hit in the head, shot in the arm, and most disturbingly, bleach had been poured down her throat. But the most chilling revelation came from the toxicology report. She died from smoke inhalation. That meant she was still alive when the car was set on fire. This wasn't a clean execution. It wasn't quick. It was torture, deliberate, sadistic, and personal. Investigators later described it as one of the most disturbing scenes they had ever encountered. Forensic experts believe bleach was used to destroy DNA evidence or to inflict maximum pain. Either way, it was a signature of cruelty. But the killers made mistakes. In the burned car, crime scene techs recovered a plastic cup that had survived the flames. On its surface was a latent fingerprint. Elsewhere, inside a plastic grocery bag under Mercedes' purse, investigators found blood and another print, pressed in with chilling clarity. Meanwhile, Mercedes' own car had been found abandoned near her apartment, with more blood in the front seat. Inside her purse were personal items left untouched, suggesting this wasn't a robbery, but something far more targeted. For police, the brutality of the crime pointed to a message. This wasn't random. This was calculated. Someone wanted to make sure Mercedes wouldn't testify, and they wanted to make sure the world knew why. Her friends and family were devastated. In the span of 24 hours, Mercedes had gone from preparing to testify in a criminal case to being the victim of a murder so vicious it shook even seasoned law enforcement to their core. The question now wasn't just who did it, but how they pulled it off, and how many people were involved. The brutality of Mercedes Vega's murder left investigators determined to find answers, but the case was complex. They weren't just looking for a killer. They were trying to unravel a coordinated plot that spanned multiple states and left a trail of digital, forensic, and human evidence in its wake. From the burned Chevrolet Malibu, forensic specialists collected what little they could. Fire may destroy a lot, but it rarely erases everything. Hidden beneath the destruction, they found a plastic grocery bag with blood near the handles, and inside it, another bag. Most crucially, they lifted a fingerprint fragile, but viable. At the same time, a plastic cup recovered from the cabin of the car contained a second print, this one preserved despite the blaze. Fire investigators believe the vehicle burned fast and hot, what they call a flash fire likely aided by an accelerant, but it wasn't hot enough to destroy all the forensic evidence. The prints didn't match anyone in the system at least not yet. Then came the break. Nearly a year later, in May 2024, a new arrest in Tennessee put Sincere Hayes, a 22-year-old man, into the National Fingerprint Database. One of the prints from the burned vehicle matched. A few weeks later, another man, Jared Gray, 25, was arrested in Georgia, and his fingerprint reportedly matched the one found on the plastic cup inside the Malibu. Both men were connected not just to the crime scene but also to the suspected ringleader, Kajo Young. According to prosecutors, phone records, airline purchases, and travel logs revealed a damning timeline. Young had purchased plane tickets for Hayes and Gray to fly to Arizona using credit cards linked back to him. When Hayes was questioned by police, he admitted knowing Young from back in Tennessee but refused to elaborate. Gray denied ever traveling to Arizona at all despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Investigators traced cell phone location data from one of the burner phones used to buy the tickets. That same number pinged repeatedly along the route of the burning car, and again near the scene where Mercedes' body was found. It also connected to a late-night call made to a third man who later told police that Young had instructed him to pick up a package believed to be Hayes and Gray shortly after Mercedes was killed. Surveillance footage, fingerprint evidence, airline records, and GPS data all began lining up. This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence. It was meticulously planned. Even the attempt to destroy evidence had failed. Bleach was found in Mercedes' system, but instead of erasing DNA, it added another layer of horror to her final moments. And the fire? Investigators believe it was meant to destroy everything, her body, any trace of the suspects, and the truth. But they underestimated forensic science. In fact, the fire left behind just enough to trace the killer step by step, from Arizona back to Tennessee and Georgia. By the time prosecutors presented their case to the grand jury, it was clear. Mercedes hadn't just been murdered, she had been silenced. But the plan didn't work. She would still speak through evidence, through witnesses, and through the relentless pursuit of justice. With mounting forensic evidence, digital footprints, and witness testimony, the prosecution moved swiftly to bring the suspects to justice. Though the legal process was far from over, the arrests marked a turning point. Sincere Hayes was extradited from Tennessee to Arizona in late spring of 2024. He was formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, and vehicle theft. Given the particularly heinous nature of Mercedes Vega's death, prosecutors announced their intent to seek the death penalty. Meanwhile, Jared Gray, arrested in Georgia, awaits extradition. He faces first-degree murder and conspiracy charges, as well as charges related to kidnapping and robbery. The physical evidences, fingerprint on a cup found inside the burned vehicle, will likely be a critical element in the case against him. As for Kajo Young, the man Mercedes had once feared, the evidence against him is growing. Prosecutors are pursuing charges of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and kidnapping. But that's not all. Young is also under investigation for his alleged role in a nationwide drug trafficking operation, accused of laundering money and organizing fentanyl shipments across state lines. His criminal world, once hidden in the shadows, has now been forced into the light. While Young has not yet been formally charged with Mercedes' murder, prosecutors have made it clear her death is central to the larger case they're building. For Mercedes' family, the arrest brought some measure of relief but no real closure. They have watched the story unfold in the news, replaying the timeline, questioning how someone so full of life could be destroyed so mercilessly. Justice may still be in motion, but for those who loved Mercedes, nothing can undo the pain or bring her back. The courtroom battles ahead may hold the final verdicts, but the emotional toll has already been delivered. Mercedes Vega never made it to the witness stand, but her voice still echoes through every piece of evidence, every fingerprint, every GPS ping, and every person fighting to hold her killers accountable. Her story is more than a crime, it's a cautionary tale about the dangers of speaking out and the extraordinary courage it takes to stand up for justice. Mercedes did everything right. She cooperated with law enforcement. She testified. She followed the system. And still, she paid the ultimate price. The system, in many ways, failed to protect her. But now, it has the chance to redeem itself by ensuring that those responsible for orchestrating her murder are held fully accountable. For her family, the scars left behind may never fully heal. Her mother, her friends, her community, they carry her memory not only in grief, but in purpose. They continue to speak her name, to seek justice not just for Mercedes, but for other women like her who've been silenced too soon. And now, we're left with one final question. How many more lives must be lost before we listen to the warning signs? Before silence stops costing women their lives? Mercedes deserved protection. She deserved justice. She deserved more time.